They laughed before the lawyer even finished reading the sentence. My sister's voice cut through the tension like a blade dipped in perfume. "Good luck being broke," Harper said, and the chuckle that followed was sharper than anything she'd ever said to my face growing up. I didn't flinch. Didn't look at her. Didn't blink. I just reached forward, took the single silver key laid out in front of me, and stood. My name is Ava Delaney. I'm Chujeste. And that was the moment I buried the last of my illusions. The will was read in our father's office, an obsidian box with high glass windows that stared out over the city he built. Gerald Delaney was not a kind man. He believed in legacy, not love. Strategy, not softness. And yet some part of me, even after all the years of silence, humiliation, and secondhand affection, still thought maybe he'd see me. Even in death. He didn't. Harper, as always, was the centerpiece. The chosen one. She sat on the leather couch with her legs crossed elegantly, a fresh manicure, and a silk blouse the color of bone. Everything about her said control. Everything about me, my muted dress, thrifted coat, and quiet presence, said forgotten. She inherited the properties, the shares, the offshore accounts. Even the vineyard in Sonoma we used to visit once a year when I still believed family meant more than blood. I got a storage unit in the middle of nowhere. Unit 47C, contents unknown, the lawyer had added with a shrug. His voice carried no judgment, but his eyes lingered on mine too long. Like he expected me to cry. Or rage. Or beg. I didn't. I drove there the next morning. Alone. No GPS, no fanfare. Just a printed address and a tank of gas. The facility was crumbling, set behind a defunct gas station, guarded by a rusted-out gate and an elderly clerk who didn't even bother to ask for ID. He handed me a clipboard and said, 47, CS back row, second left. I think he was surprised when I didn't ask questions. When I opened the unit, the smell hit me first, old metal, mildew, dust. The kind of air that hadn't moved in years. Inside was chaos. A broken foosball table. Half a couch. Piles of boxes with no labels. A chipped mannequin. It looked like the remnants of a garage sale no one wanted to visit. For a second, I stood there, eyes adjusting to the dim light slipping in through the cracked ceiling panels, and let the cold realization settle in. He really did leave me trash, but instead of turning around and slamming the door like I wanted, I pulled out my phone, took a photo, and texted Harper a single word, thanks. No response. Just the satisfying throb of silence. I spent 2 hours digging through the mess. At first, I was just looking for anything salvageable, something I could sell to pretend this wasn't a total humiliation. But somewhere between the box of vintage light bulbs and the crate of old campaign posters, I found something that made me pause. A black box. Locked. Heavy. With no markings except a small engraving on the bottom, ARD. Those were my initials. Ava Rosalind Delaney. No one ever called me that. Not even my father. My pulse quickened, but I kept my hand steady. I didn't open it there. I took it home, set it on the kitchen table of my one-bedroom apartment, and just stared at it. My ex-boyfriend used to say I had a knack for walking away right before things got interesting. Maybe he was right. But this time, I didn't walk. The lock wasn't electronic, just a small, intricate puzzle mechanism. I solved it in 6 minutes. Inside were 3 items, a stack of small leather notebooks, a set of VHS tapes wrapped in plastic, and an envelope with my name written in my father's handwriting. I didn't open the envelope. Not yet. I started. With the tapes. It took me a day to find a VCR that worked. Craigslist, $25, and a guy named Ron who smelled like paint thinner. The first tape was labeled 1997. Phase 1. I almost stopped at 30 seconds in because there he was. My father. Younger, sharper, unguarded in a way I'd never seen. He sat behind a desk, surrounded by ledgers, maps, and what looked like vault access documents. He was talking to the camera like it was a confessional. Legacy isn't given. It's protected, he said. Harper plays the game. Ava watches. One sees the board. The other sees the players. I froze. He wasn't talking about her. He was talking about me. Tape after tape, dozens of hours, revealed the truth. Gerald Delaney had been quietly moving his fortune. Not the visible fortune, not the showy empire he left Harper. The real one. The off-book assets. The tech patents, the shadow accounts, the land rights buried under subsidiaries. He created an alternate empire, one no one knew existed, and he built it under a name, a point or point D point my name. Each tape documented the transfer process. Each notebook held the cipher keys, the account information, the code phrases. But none of it was usable unless you could align all 3. Tapes. Notes. And the envelope. I opened it on the 3rd day. Inside, one sentence, if you're reading this, you've already won. It wasn't a gift. It was a challenge. I didn't cry. I didn't feel joy. What I felt was weight. The kind that settles in your bones. The kind that tells you everything before this moment was prologue. For weeks, I didn't speak to anyone. I called in sick. I moved the materials into storage under a new name. I changed my phone number. I bought a burner. I got in touch with someone I hadn't spoken to in years. His name was Liam. He used to be mine, once. Before my father told him I was a dead end. That dating me would ruin his prospects. He didn't argue. He left, but Liam owed me something. And I had the kind of leverage now that rewrote debts. He worked in digital security. I didn't tell him everything. Just enough. A theoretical scenario. He didn't ask questions. 2 days later, he called and said, if what you're holding is real, you don't need a lawyer. You need a firewall and a way out. Out of what? Whatever room you're in. I didn't sleep that night, but I didn't run either. Instead, I went to Harper's gala the next evening. She was launching a new luxury brand, Delaney Luxe. The invitation had been sent weeks ago, clearly out of politeness or misdirected superiority. I had an RSVP. I showed up in black. No jewelry. No makeup. Just presence. She saw me across the room and blinked. Then smiled. Ava, she said, air-kissing both cheeks. I was hoping you'd come. I heard about the storage unit. Such a shame. But hey, maybe you'll start a recycling business. I already have, I said. What's it called? She asked, sipping her champagne. Reclamation. She frowned. That sounds intense. It is. I didn't stay long. Just enough to be seen. Just enough to see, because tucked into the corner of the room, behind the donors and designers, was the same lawyer who'd read our father's will. He wasn't laughing now. He was watching me, and when I met his eyes, he looked away first. That was when I realized something wasn't right. He knew the storage unit was more than a joke. More than a punishment. And yet he played his part. Smirked at me. Let them laugh, which meant the game wasn't just rigged. It was orchestrated. Someone wanted me to walk away. To abandon it. To throw the key in the trash and disappear quietly. But I don't disappear, not anymore, not now that I see the board, not now that I remember every move, and this time, I'm not just watching. I'm playing. I didn't go back to the storage unit. The next day. I waited 3.3 days where my phone stayed silent. No, just checking in, from Harper. No follow-up from the lawyer. No stray apology from anyone pretending to care. It was like I'd been swept off the stage the moment the curtain closed. And maybe that was the point. They assumed I'd disappear. They'd given me trash because they thought that's where I belonged. I wanted to prove them wrong. But more than that, I wanted to understand why, when I returned to 47C, it wasn't with curiosity. It was with precision. Gloves. Flashlight. Zip bags. I wasn't looking for valuables, I was hunting for patterns. The difference between a fool and a player is intent. Most of the boxes were full of junk that didn't even qualify as antique. Torn suit jackets, rusted bolts, brittle books. I documented everything before touching it. What caught my eye wasn't what stood out, it was what didn't fit. A plain gray banker's box in the corner. No dust. No label. Unlike everything else, it hadn't aged. Inside was a stack of VHS tapes, but this time, they weren't wrapped in plastic. No, each one had a single word written in thick red marker: property, holdings, relocate, names, phase. And at the bottom, a tape that simply read, fail-safe. It wasn't the labeling that stopped me. It was what was tucked inside the case of the last tape. A sticky note in my father's unmistakable handwriting: if Harper finds these first, burn them. I stared at the note for a long time. That sentence, just 9 words, rewrote the entire storage unit. It meant he knew Harper would come looking. It meant this wasn't just a disinheritance. It was a security measure, and the fact that I was reading it meant one of two things: either he trusted me, or I was his last resort. I took everything and left the unit exactly as I found it. Locked. Undisturbed. Let them think I gave up. Let them believe the joke had landed. Sometimes your greatest weapon is letting them think they've already won. That night, I set up the VCR again. The first tape I watched was labeled Names. My father sat in the same chair as the earlier videos, older now. Grayer. Less arrogant. More focused. He listed aliases. Shell corporations. Dummy accounts. That spanned 3 continents. Every time he said a name, he would nod slightly, almost like he was confirming it for himself, but halfway through, something changed. He paused. Looked off camera. I know who's watching this, he said, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. And if it's not you, Ava, if this ended up in the wrong hands, then I failed. But if you're here, that means you got the key. That means you listened. My hands were ice. He didn't sound sentimental. He sounded strategic. Like even now, he was moving pieces on a board I didn't fully see. You'll need help, he said. Not Harper. Never Harper. She only knows how to spend. He reached under the desk and pulled out a photo. It was turned toward the camera. Not me, and yet when he tapped it, I knew that it was Liam. He knew Ava Delaney, the man who told me Liam was a distraction, who ordered him out of my life with a financial threat that left no room for protest, had tracked him after. Not to punish. To prepare. The message was clear. Use him. It should have made me angry. Instead, it made me sharp. If my father saw enough in me to build this labyrinth, then I'd better learn how to walk it with my eyes open. I called Liam that night. Told him I needed to meet. No pleasantries. No explanations. Just urgency. He hesitated. Why now? Because you're still in my father's playbook. Silence. Then, you found something. I need to know if it's real. He didn't ask how I got his number. He just sent an address. The next day, I walked into a nondescript building in a tech corridor downtown. Liam had changed. Fuller beard. Less arrogance. But his eyes were the same, deeply analytical, always reading between your sentences. He sat me down. I gave him one tape, one notebook, and one question. Can you prove this isn't a hoax? An hour later, he returned. This isn't just real, he said. It's dangerous. He pointed to one of the corporate names. This isn't dormant. It's active. Someone's still using it. But the transactions look like they're bouncing off proxies. Someone's hiding movement. Harper? No, he said. Too clean. This is someone trained. That was the moment everything pivoted. This wasn't just a treasure map. It was a war chest. And someone was already guarding it. We spent the next week running verification. Cross-referencing names with deeds, balances, and metadata. Each confirmation was a nail in the coffin of my old self. There was one moment I'll never forget. We tracked one asset to a condo in Manhattan, supposedly empty for years. But the ownership was under Delaney Trust, B. The B wasn't for Harper. It was for backup. My name was on the digital title. Hidden in code. Signed 6 years ago. He hadn't forgotten me. He'd just buried me deep enough to be safe while Liam ran numbers. I returned to the storage unit for a final sweep. I needed to make sure nothing had been touched. It had. Box 12 was gone. I stared at the empty spot for 10 seconds before locking the unit and walking back to the clerk. Has anyone else accessed 47C? I asked. He barely looked up. Just you. Can I see the log? No log. This isn't a hotel, lady. I smiled coldly. Then I'll need your security footage. He laughed. It's broken. Of course it was. I didn't press. Just nodded, thanked him, and walked out, because I recognized the handwriting on the check-in form taped to the front desk. Harper's assistant, the sweet one. Always smiling. Always asking me how I was when we crossed paths. I never gave her a second thought. I should have. Later that night, I pulled up my father's last video. He looked tired. Older. Slower. This only works if you stay quiet. The moment you make noise, the leeches come. And you know who they are? He didn't name her. He didn't have to. He stared into the camera and said, your silence is your shield. But your memory is your sword. Never forget what they did. I didn't. I don't, and now I know what they fear most isn't that I'll fail. It's that I'll succeed without them. The night I handed Liam the first notebook, he didn't ask if it was legal. He asked if I trusted him. I said nothing, which he correctly read as yes. We worked in silence for hours, seated at opposite ends of his loft. His place was everything mine wasn't. Clean, expensive, unbothered. A wall of screens. A fridge that whirred like a whisper. I watched him scan page after page without blinking, his fingers tapping out calculations I couldn't follow. I wasn't there for the details. I was there to know if I was crazy. I wasn't. This isn't encrypted, he finally said, holding up the first page. It's a pattern system, 3-column cross-reference, based on temporal cues. He built an index using dates, not logic. That's rare. It's deliberate, I said. He wanted confusion to look like chaos. He nodded slowly, then opened a program that looked military. I'll need a few hours. Maybe longer. I'm not leaving. I didn't ask. You too. I stayed. Not out of nostalgia, but out of calculation. Liam was sharp, but he was also a risk. And I'd learned that the most dangerous moment in any operation is when someone realizes what they're holding is worth more than their conscience. I watched him like a hawk. At 2:14 a.m., he found the first gate. He wasn't hiding money, Liam murmured. He was hiding control. Ava, this isn't just off-grid wealth. This is ownership. Do you understand what this is? No. And I don't want to until we can move it. He turned to face me fully. For the first time that night. You're sitting on a second empire. Unregistered land deeds. Shares in companies that shouldn't exist anymore. Tech patents tied to foundations no one audits. And, he swallowed. You don't move this with a bank account. You move this with leverage. I stood and crossed to the window. Downtown blinked back at me, indifferent and glittering. The city hadn't changed, but I had. My father hadn't just left me wealth. He'd left me an engine. And I needed to learn how to drive it before someone else figured out the ignition sequence. The next morning, I visited the public records office. I didn't use my real name. I didn't walk in like a woman with a purpose. I walked in like a secretary on a coffee break. Head down. Shoulders hunched. I wasn't looking for documents. I was watching who else was. I saw Harper's lawyer there. He didn't see me. He was asking about Ava Delaney's final amendments, specifically if any copies existed that weren't in the main file. The clerk said no, of course. But his body language said he was lying. I took note of the nameplate on his desk, H. Emery. 2 hours later, Liam confirmed that the Delaney Trust had been altered 27 days before my father's death. A clause had been removed. I checked the hospital records. Gerald was in a coma during that window. The signature on the amendment, digitally forged. Harper didn't just win the inheritance, she rewrote the game. I didn't tell Liam that part. Not yet. I needed to sit with it. To process what it meant. It meant the insult of the storage unit wasn't a dismissal. It was protection. My father knew they'd come for the official assets. He knew Harper would manipulate, override, even falsify. So he pulled his power out of the spotlight and buried it in the dark, and left me the flashlight, and now, someone was trying to turn it off. That night, my apartment was broken into. They didn't take anything. Just rearranged things. A book moved. A frame tilted. The desk drawer left an inch ajar. It was psychological. A warning. I didn't call the cops. I called Liam. He came without questions, scanned the place with a small black wand, and found a listening device in my bedside lamp. He held it up between 2 fingers. That's not amateur. Then it's Harper. Could be. Could also be someone you haven't met yet. What does that mean? He hesitated. The kind of system your dad built? It doesn't stay hidden this long without help. Someone else was involved. Possibly still is. The thought landed like ice down my spine. I'd been focused on Harper, on her ambition, her cruelty, her greed. But what if she was just the loudest distraction? What if the real threat hadn't spoken yet? I went back through the tapes. One in particular stood out. Dated, 2006. My father looked visibly shaken. There was no preamble, no ledger. Just one sentence: if this falls into the wrong hands, pull everything out of Prague. Prague, that word had appeared in one of the notebooks. Next to it, a string of numbers and the phrase, Hotel Carlin. I asked Liam to look it up. He told me it had burned down in 2011. Electrical fire. 1 casualty. No investigation. The casualty? A woman named Lenora Witt. Never heard of her, but when I cross-referenced the name with my father's known associates, she appeared on a single document from 1998. She had signed as a consultant on a tech deal that went dark 6 months later. I knew I had to go deeper. But I also knew I had to mislead Harper first. So I sent her a text, just 1 line: found a watch. Might be worth something. Want it? She called instantly. I didn't answer. An hour later, a man showed up outside my apartment. Clean suit. Sunglasses. Too still to be casual. I watched from the window. He stood there for 17 minutes before walking away. I waited until midnight, then slipped out the back. I didn't go to Liam's. I went to the only other person who might still owe my father a favor, his old accountant, Daniel Ames. He answered the door with a gun behind his back and eyes like burnt paper. I'm not here to rob you, I said. He didn't lower the weapon. I'm Ava, I added. He blinked once, then stepped aside. Inside, everything smelled like coffee and fear. He hadn't aged well. His hands shook when he poured a drink. But when I showed him the notebook, the shaking stopped. He read the first page. Jesus Christ, he muttered. He actually did it. Did what? He said he'd get his empire and rebuild it where the sharks couldn't swim. And he put my name on it. Daniel looked up. Then they're coming for you. They already are. He poured 2 drinks, sat across from me, and finally said what no one else had: your father never trusted anyone fully. Not even me. But if he gave you this, it means he trusted you enough to finish what he couldn't. And what's that? Expose them. All of them. Them, not just Harper, not just lawyers, but something bigger, something deliberate, and I wasn't running anymore. I didn't sleep after Daniel said the word expose. He meant it as a warning. I heard it as an instruction. The idea that my father had enemies beyond our family wasn't new. But the realization that he'd built an entire covert empire not to hoard wealth, but to shield truth, rearranged everything. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. It was about control. Ownership. Of silence. And someone had been paying to keep that silence intact long before Harper sharpened her claws. The first thing I did was disappear. I abandoned my apartment. Bought a prepaid phone. Cut all digital traces. Even Liam didn't know where I was for 2 days. When he finally reached me, I was living in a sublet above a pawn shop on the edge of the industrial district. The kind of place where people didn't ask questions unless you stopped paying cash. He showed up unannounced, holding 2 coffees and an envelope. "You're not safe," he said. "Never was." He placed the envelope on the table. Inside were photos. Blurry, zoomed-in shots. Me. Daniel. The storage unit. The clerk. Even the hospital where my father died. I flipped through slowly, one frame at a time, until I reached the last. Harper. Standing outside a building I didn't recognize. Talking to a man I'd never seen before. She was smiling. "She's moving something," Liam said. "Property, assets, or information?" "My guess? She's cleaning house before someone starts asking questions." "Someone like me?" "No. Someone higher up." I looked again at the man in the photo. Suited. Expensive shoes. A coat that didn't belong to the city. The angle didn't show his face, but I recognized the stance. I'd seen it once before, years ago, standing behind my father at a board meeting. "That's his fixer," I said slowly. "That man cleaned up the Delaney divorce scandal in '08. I thought he retired." "Looks like he didn't." Liam sat across from me, rubbing his temples. "You need to understand something. If your father built an empire within an empire, he didn't do it alone. There are names in those notebooks you haven't read yet. And the moment those names resurface, they become liabilities. To Harper. To that man. To everyone who profited off the lie." I nodded. "You're not holding money, Ava. You're holding leverage. And leverage, mishandled, becomes a death sentence." I started planning. Not reacting, planning. There's a difference. One is fear in motion. The other is control without noise. First, I created shell identities. Pulled dormant LLCs from my father's database and tied them to email addresses no one had used in over a decade. Through those, I began quietly transferring ownership of several assets, small ones at first. A warehouse in Nevada. A forgotten condo in Lisbon. A tech patent that had been sitting untouched since 2012. Each move was slow. Untraceable. Legal. Enough to hide beneath layers of bureaucracy. Next, I gave Harper a signal. A press release, anonymous. Sent to 5 journalists I knew wouldn't resist the scent of scandal. It mentioned nothing directly. Just a question: who really controlled the Delaney fortune before the will? Within 24 hours, Harper called me. She never called. Not since the day of the reading. "Where are you?" she asked. Her tone was cool, but the edge wasn't subtle. "Busy," I said. "I saw something disturbing today." "Was it your reflection?" Silence. "Then, you always were a mouthy brat." I didn't reply. Silence, when weaponized, speaks louder than retorts. "I don't know what you think you're doing, Ava, but you're in over your head." I thought I was broke and irrelevant. That storage unit was a mercy. "No," I said. "It was a message. You just didn't understand the language." She hung up. 2 hours later, my burner phone buzzed. An unknown number. A single message: "Nice move. Now let's see if you can survive the next one." I didn't panic. I traced the number. It pinged from a corporate building in DC, government adjacent. The fixer wasn't just working with Harper. He was pulling strings higher than I imagined. I called Liam. Told him to get ready to vanish. "You're not leaving, are you?" he asked. "No. But you might have to." "What are you planning?" Something Harper would never see coming. I dug through the tapes again. I remembered something my father once said in a recording: "Every great power needs a failsafe. Something no one knows exists until it detonates." I found the tape labeled "failsafe" buried beneath a pile I hadn't catalogued. I almost missed it. The label was smudged, almost erased. As if someone had tried to make it disappear before deciding not to risk it. I played it. My father looked different here. Weary. Resigned. Behind him, a wall of documents and maps, none of which I recognized. "If you're watching this, the safeguards have failed. And the empire has fractured." He reached under the desk and pulled out a drive. Inside, this is the original transaction ledger. Not the decoys. The real ones. The people who funded the shell. The deals that made us untouchable. He placed it in a safe behind him. Spoke a code aloud. Coordinates. Then he did something I didn't expect. He looked directly into the lens. His voice dropped. "And Ava, if it's you, burn it all. Not for me. For you." I froze the frame. Coordinates. I entered them. They pointed to a storage facility in a different state. Not 47C. Not even the same region. My father had hidden his kill switch across the country. The next morning, I rented a car. Left Liam behind with instructions to wipe everything if I didn't check in within 48 hours. It was a 10-hour drive. I didn't stop. The facility was pristine. Corporate. Sterile. I gave the code. They gave me a key. Unit 9E. Inside, nothing but a single box. Inside the box, a hard drive, a list of names, and a letter. The letter was short: "If Harper ever tries to erase you, this is your resurrection." I opened the drive. There they were: names, transactions, accounts, cross-border deals. Some tied to politicians, some to private defense contractors, others to charitable foundations now defunct. If this went public, Harper wouldn't just fall, the entire Delaney legacy would disintegrate. But I didn't want revenge, not yet. I wanted positioning. I copied the drive, sent a heavily redacted version to a former investigative journalist my father once sued into silence. He now ran a podcast on corporate corruption. No context. Just a note: you only saw the surface. Here's the ocean. Then I drove back. Clean. Untraced. By the time I returned, Harper had launched a new PR campaign. A televised interview. Humanitarian. Rebranding. The whole performance. I watched from a distance. She smiled like the empire was hers, but I held the detonator, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the overlooked sister. I was the storm she'd never hear coming. The air shifted. Before the call came. I felt it in the silence, too thick to be random. In the way the barista at the cafe glanced twice. In the sudden absence of the man who used to jog past my sublet window every morning, like clockwork. Ghosts don't vanish on their own. Someone makes them disappear. I was still watching Harper. From a distance, letting her believe her curated world was intact. She moved like she always had, draped in entitlement, polished in performance. But underneath, there were cracks. I could see it in the photo ops, the way she overcompensated with smiles, the stiffness in her posture, the interviews that felt more defensive than promotional. Then the call came, a blocked number. I answered. "I want to talk," she said. I let a breath hang before replying. "You're already talking. In person." "Why?" "I think we're being watched." She didn't say who. Didn't say why. But I heard it in her voice. She didn't mean we, she meant herself. "I'll text you a location," I said. "Don't bring anyone." That night, we met at a diner off the interstate. Neutral ground. Greasy lighting. Cameras that hadn't worked since 2014. She wore a black coat and no jewelry, which told me more than anything she could have said aloud. She slid into the booth across from me and didn't order. "I'm being audited," she said flatly. "And? Not by the IRS. I assume this isn't a social call." "You leaked something," she accused. "To that podcast. You're trying to destroy me." I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted like rust and ash. "No. I'm just correcting the narrative." She leaned forward. "You think you're clever? Sitting on whatever trash he left you, playing mysterious? He gave you garbage. I got the legacy." "Did you?" I asked, tilting my head. "Because, last I checked, your name isn't on half the assets your new PR campaign's flaunting." That stopped her. She blinked hard. "You've been watching my finances?" "No," I said. "I've been watching your assumptions." The server dropped off a check we hadn't asked for. Harper glanced at it like it might explode. "I don't know what he gave you," she said, quieter now. "But if it has my name on it, we need to talk." And there it was, the fear. She'd realized the empire she thought she controlled might be built on sand. I left cash on the table. "More than enough. I don't need to talk," I said as I stood. "I just need you to keep pretending you're safe." As I walked out, I saw him again. Across the lot, leaning against a black car. The man from the photos. My father's fixer. He didn't follow me. He didn't have to, because when I returned to the sublet, my safe had been emptied, not the real one. The decoy I'd planted, filled with old USB drives, irrelevant legal documents, a burner phone full of fabricated correspondence between Ava Delaney and a fake Panama attorney. I smiled. They thought they'd caught me. They'd only caught what I wanted them to find. Liam called the next morning, his voice tight. "They hit my place too." Took the bait. But someone left a message. "What kind?" "A red envelope. No writing. Just a flash drive inside. Encrypted." "Decrypt it." "It'll take a day." "Make it half." I didn't tell him about Harper's visit. I needed time to think. Then I made my move. I contacted a name from my father's tapes, someone he'd referred to as the Ledger. An old financier who'd once controlled silent equity in dozens of hidden firms. He was supposed to be dead. But nothing in my father's world stayed buried unless he wanted it that way. I used one of the shell corporations to request a transfer of interest. A bait transaction. Small. Suspicious. Enough to ping anyone still watching. 3 hours later, I got an anonymous email. Subject: proof of life. Attachment: a photo of me, age 15, standing beside my father in a courtyard I barely remembered. It had never been published. Never shared. It was the kind of file only someone close would keep. The message beneath it was a single line: "You're not ready for what you're waking up." I stared at it until the screen dimmed. They were trying to intimidate me. Instead, they confirmed something I suspected since Prague. There was someone else, someone above Harper. Someone who helped build the labyrinth, and they were nervous. Liam cracked the flash drive. Inside were video clips. Dozens of them. Surveillance footage. Not just of me, but of Harper. The fixer. Even Daniel. Each timestamped, catalogued, and annotated. But the annotations weren't in English. They were in Czech. That meant one thing: the Prague connection wasn't just historical. It was still active. Whoever survived the hotel fire in 2011 wasn't Lenora Witt. Or if it was, she never died. I cross-referenced one of the annotations. It pointed to a shell company still active in Eastern Europe. Owned by a subsidiary under my father's early holdings, transferred, on paper, to someone named Elf Vitkova. Lenora's maiden name. I hadn't just stumbled into my father's empire. I'd walked into a Cold War that never ended, and I was starting to realize I wasn't the only one playing long, but I had one advantage no one else did. Harper, for all her scheming, she was still emotional. Still reactive. Still predictable, and I'd just watched her squirm. I called her the next day. I found something, I said. About Prague. Silence. Then, I don't know what you're talking about. You should come see it. Why? Because if you don't, I'll send it to Forbes instead. I sent the address. She arrived within 2 hours. I let her into a warehouse rented under one of my shell names. On the wall was a projection, surveillance photos, emails, financial links, all tied to Harper's recent deals, every one of them connected back to accounts she'd told the IRS didn't exist. She went pale. You set me up. No, I said. You did that to yourself. I just took notes. You can't prove any of this will stick. I don't need to. I just need them to see it. Who's them? I stepped closer. The people you stole from. The people who think you're loyal. She started shaking. I handed her an envelope. Inside, one named Vitkova. What is this? Your replacement. And that was the real game, because while Harper had been scrambling for control, I'd already moved the power elsewhere. Not to take it, but to make it visible, and the moment she realized she was no longer the center of the board, she folded. I'll do whatever you want, she whispered, but I wasn't listening, because I had already turned and walked away. I didn't see the agent's face. Just his coat, dark wool. No logo. Too tailored for standard issue. He walked into the gallery at 4:12 p.m., stopped 5 feet from me, and said, "We should talk outside." I followed without a word. Outside, he handed me a card. No name. No department. Just a number, embossed in black on black. Is this supposed to impress me? I asked. It's supposed to keep you alive. He didn't blink. You've opened something that was meant to stay closed, he continued. And certain people are now asking if your silence can be purchased. Not interested. I didn't say it was a question. He turned and walked away before I could reply. The card was warm from his hand. When I looked closer, I saw it, a micro-etched string of characters, coordinates and a timestamp. I went straight to Liam. He scanned it through 3 layers of shielding. The data led to a secure drop point in Virginia government land, which meant this wasn't just someone watching, this was someone inside. I had expected pushback from Harper. Expected shadows from my father's old world. I hadn't expected a seat at the national table. But that's what this was now. Not just a legacy war. A classified one. Who do you think he was? Liam asked. Doesn't matter, I said. He's not my enemy. Then who is? That's what we're about to find out. That night, I returned to the tapes. I digitized them all, but something told me to go analog, dust, static, mechanical grind. Tape 17. One I hadn't watched closely. It was labeled only, containment. My father looked older here. Not just tired, worried. If this reaches you, he said, it means someone failed to erase you. That's good. It also means the containment protocol didn't hold. That's bad. He took a sip of something clear and set the glass down. You'll be approached. First with money. Then with threat. Finally, with offer. They'll make it sound like protection. It's not. He leaned closer to the camera. There's a document. Codename, Sable Mirror. It outlines the offshore black ops that were funneled through Delaney Industries between 2004 and 2009. I didn't authorize it. But my name's on it. I paused the tape. Sable Mirror. The name meant nothing to me, but the implication was clear. Someone had used my father's empire as a shell for something far bigger and illegal. And if they thought I had that document, I wasn't just a nuisance. I was a liability. I called the number on the agent's card. It rang once. Meet me where the water meets the fence, the voice said, then the line went dead. Liam traced the phrase. It referred to a small airstrip near Quantico. Decommissioned. Unmapped in recent public files. I went alone. At 2:17 a.m., he stepped out of the dark, same coat. Same silence. You're a quiet bomb, he said. And they don't like bombs they didn't build. Then they should have buried me deeper. You're smarter than they expected. I'm not here to play spy. Good, he said. Because I'm not offering protection. What then? An exchange. He handed me a flash drive. It contains the names of every beneficiary tied to Sable Mirror. Burn it if you want. Leak it if you must. But know this, if you expose them all at once, they'll take you down first. What's the alternative? Slow collapse, he said. Drip the pressure. Make them sweat. Power responds best to quiet panic. I stepped back. Why help me? His reply was a sentence I never expected. Your father helped me disappear. I'm repaying the debt. Then he vanished. I drove back at dawn. Liam was waiting. Did he give you anything? I showed him the drive. He backed up like it was toxic. Jesus, Ava, do you know what this is? Leverage. No. It's a kill list. I spent the next 72 hours analyzing the files, every name linked to known government fronts, corporate shell firms, arms deals. Some of the names were still active in politics. Others supposedly dead. Harper wasn't one of them, but one of her financial advisors was. I checked again. It wasn't AMAN. It was Lenora Vitkova, the woman who was supposed to have died. In the Prague fire, she hadn't just survived. She'd embedded inside Harper's inner circle, which meant Harper wasn't just ignorant. She was compromised, and I was the only one who knew it. That night, I sent Harper a single sentence. I hope you know who's really managing your money. She didn't reply, but someone else did. My burner buzzed. Unknown number, I warned you. Once. Walk away. I stared at the screen for 10 seconds, then I replied, you think I haven't already started walking toward you? The line went dead. I knew what came next. Retaliation. So I made the first move. I sent the agent's flash drive, encrypted, redacted, to a quiet name in federal oversight. Someone I remembered from a long ago gala. He'd been kind to me once. When Harper shoved me into a table 4, standing in the wrong place. Kindness has memory. Within hours, I got an email from a secure drop server. No subject. No signature, just one line, Sable Mirror no longer silent. And then the flood began, not public, not yet. But movement, internal investigations. Quiet subpoenas. Leaks to the right people. The shadows shifted, and Harper, she finally called, her voice trembled. You need to stop, she said. They're coming after me now. I didn't know, Ava, I swear, I didn't know what she was. She's your advisor. She was recommended. I thought, no, I said. You didn't think. You never do. You just consume. Please. I'm being followed. Watched. I haven't slept in days. I said nothing. You've made your point. I almost laughed. My point hasn't even begun. Then I hung up. I opened my window. The city was quiet, but something in the air had shifted. The storm I'd been building, it had finally touched ground, and I wasn't in its path. I was the one steering it. The first sign of Harper's desperation wasn't her silence, it was her generosity. 3 days after our last call, I received an envelope. No return address, but the paper was her favorite shade of cream and the handwriting was either hers or someone paid well enough to mimic it. Inside was a check. 7 figures. Signed. No note. Just the money. I folded it once, then slid it into the freezer behind an unopened bag of peas. Not for safekeeping. For the reminder, people only pay to silence what they're afraid will speak louder. Harper wasn't trying to negotiate. She was trying to buy my surrender with hush money, without the insult of apology. But fear doesn't write checks that clean. Unless there's a bigger mess behind them. So I started pulling threads, not from Harper's public assets, they were smoke by now. I focused on her advisors. Names she never bothered to vet because she thought power was armor. I found a name. Bridget Ralston. On paper, she was a compliance consultant based in Zurich. Private listings. No online presence. Not even a tax trail until 2 years ago. But buried in an old Delaney Industries contract was a payment made to Ralston Consulting, tied to discrete asset neutralization. I sent the file to Liam. He replied 2 hours later with a single sentence, Ralston isn't a consultant. She's an eraser. Someone designed to disappear problems. Not people. Information. Evidence. Witnesses, and Harper had hired her, not before. Now, which meant Harper had decided the only way to stop her own fall was to rewrite the past faster than I could reveal it. I didn't confront her. I let her believe. I was still underground, licking wounds. Instead, I went to Daniel Ames, the old accountant. He was still alive, still twitchy, and still scared. I asked him if he knew Ralston. He didn't say yes. He just went pale. She handles clean slates. He said. But not the kind you want. She doesn't delete, she replaces. Replaces what? History. She'll forge records so perfectly, even you forget the truth. Why would Harper need her now? Daniel didn't answer. I leaned in. What's she rewriting? He hesitated too long. So I pushed the folder across the table. Inside, every trace of Ralston I'd uncovered. It wasn't complete, but it was enough to tell Daniel I wasn't guessing. He finally spoke. Your birth record. The table between us seemed to vanish. What? She's rewriting your place in the family. Trying to backdate amendments to the trust. If she succeeds, she'll have proof that you were adopted, illegitimate. That the will left you the storage unit for a reason. I laughed once. Short. Flat. She's rewriting me out of my own blood. Daniel nodded. She's erasing the foundation of your claim. If she finishes before you move, the legal system won't touch your case. They'll call you a fraud. And that was it, not just financial war. It was existential. Harper was betting I wouldn't fight dirtier than she could. So I proved her wrong. That night, I staged a leak. A controlled file drop to a low-tier gossip blog with just enough credibility to cause chaos but not enough reach to expose everything. The file included a list of suspicious payments made by Harper to overseas accounts, unverified, unconfirmed, but with just enough real data to trigger questions. The blog published it within hours. The internet exploded, but Harper didn't call. Someone else did. Unknown number. Female voice. Controlled. You're playing with knives. I have better aim than she does. You think you're righteous? No, I said. I think I'm thorough. There was a pause. Then, meet me. Who are you? You already know. Ralston. She gave me coordinates. I countered with a neutral site, an abandoned bank branch turned co-working space. Full of cameras. Mind out. We met at noon. She wore gray. Not expensive, not cheap. Purposefully. Anonymous. Her face was forgettable. Her eyes weren't. You think you have leverage, she said. I have truth. You have pieces. You don't even know the whole game. Then enlighten me. She placed a drive on the table between us. Everything you think your father built, someone else protected. There's a reason you're still alive, Ava. You're useful. Until you're not. I'm not afraid of you. You should be. But not for the reasons you think. I picked up the drive. She stood. Harper's not your enemy. She's your mirror. You just chose different weapons. Then she walked out. I didn't open the drive immediately. Instead, I waited until I was alone. Liam monitored the scan. Triple firewall. No external pings. The drive was clean, its contents, a single folder labeled contingency. Inside, documents linking Ava Delaney to off-book transactions I hadn't seen before. But they weren't damning. They were curated. Selective. Forged just well enough to implicate, but poorly enough to fall apart under scrutiny. It was bait, and I'd taken it. She wanted me to leak it. To destroy my credibility with false evidence so that when the real files surfaced, no one would believe them. She wasn't here to win the war, she was here to poison the well. So I pivoted. I went quiet. For 3 days. I said nothing, moved nothing. Contacted no one. Let them wonder, let them think I doubted myself. Then I made my final call. To the voice who first found me, the federal contact. Ralston made a move, I said. She gave me fake files to tank the evidence chain. Expected. Why? Because you're close. How close? The silence on the line lasted 3 heartbeats. Then, check Harper's asset list. The one from the original will. I did, and there it was. An offshore firm I'd skipped over before. Thought it was just a tax shelter, but it wasn't. It was the holding company for a dormant trust, one that had only one recorded transaction in 15 years. The buyer? Lenora Vitkova. She hadn't just infiltrated Harper's circle, she owned part of it. That was the final pivot. Harper wasn't even holding the wheel anymore, she was the puppet, too arrogant to see the strings, and I wasn't cutting them. I was pulling them tighter. I didn't need confirmation from the voice on the line to know Lenora Vitkova was more than a shadow. She was the architect of Harper's collapse, and Harper never even noticed her enter the room. The offshore firm I'd just uncovered was a ghost trust. Legally dormant, publicly invisible, privately loaded. Every asset my father wanted hidden from corporate regulators had been funneled there through backdoor agreements. And the name listed as silent partner? Vitkova, not a leaked data placement. Ava Delaney hadn't just hidden assets for me. He'd buried them in the one place no Delaney but me could access, through a signature tied to an identity only I had ever used. A minor name from a university job no one remembered. Except him. That was the key. The name was listed on the trust's final authorization document, embedded in metadata, A. Marin, a name I hadn't used in 16 years, and somehow, Vitkova knew it, which meant she'd seen the final ledger, which meant she'd been inside the archive, not just recently. Back then, she wasn't Harper's ally. She'd been my father's operative, and now she was mine, but I couldn't reach her. No phone. No address. She didn't need them. She contacted me 2 days after the revelation. A courier dropped a sealed manila folder at my building's front desk. No sender. Inside, a black USB and a typed note. You were never the heir. You were the firewall. Meet me in the ashes. The address pointed to a long-abandoned Delaney factory in the outskirts, one my father had shut down in 2004 after a fire gutted the north wing. Meet me in the ashes. It was too poetic to be coincidental. I went alone. No. Liam. No surveillance. No weapons. She was waiting inside, seated on a metal stool like she'd been there for years. The air smelled like rust and old books. You found the trust, she said, not looking up. You designed it. I protected it. There's a difference. Why now? She finally looked up. Because Harper was never your opponent. She was your distraction. I didn't speak. You've been chasing your father's ghost, she said. Trying to finish a puzzle he left you. But the truth is, Ava, you were never supposed to solve it. Then what? You were supposed to survive it. I stepped closer. Survive what? She stood. Pulled a burned ledger from her coat. I was the one who started the fire in this factory. On your father's orders. She handed it to me. Inside are the only physical records of every shell company tied to Harper's accounts. But more importantly, tied to the people she owed. The people he owed, I corrected. She tilted her head. No. Gerald owed no one. Harper leveraged his name. Borrowed against accounts she didn't understand. And now, those accounts are calling in. I opened the ledger, some names I recognized, some I wish I hadn't. Weapons firms. Data laundering. Agencies. One flagged for trafficking. Harper had used these groups to inflate her value, secure private capital, expand her inheritance into a brand, but now that capital was collapsing, and every dirty dollar pointed back to the family trust.to. Me, you're saying I'm liable? You were, until today. I looked up. She tapped the USB. This is your firewall. Gerald built it into the core of the trust code. A single trigger clause. If ever you were named in connection to offshore crimes, the entire portfolio would redirect. Redirect to who? To the US government. I stared. Your father believed in many things, she continued. But most of all, he believed in leverage. And he believed you'd know when to use it. And if I don't? Then Harper will burn. And she'll take you with her. It wasn't a choice. It was a purge. I took the drive. On my way out. I called Liam. Prep a drop link. I'm about to do something irreversible. Are you sure? No. But I'm done surviving. The upload took 6 minutes. By the time it was done, my name was cleared from every tied asset. The trust was dead. The firewall had activated, and Harper, she was exposed, but exposure wasn't enough. I needed confession. So I baited her, sent her a single email. From an old, inactive address. Subject, only one of us walks away from this. No body. No attachments, just the subject. She replied 2 hours later. A single line. Fine. Let's talk. We met at our father's mausoleum. Of course she chose drama. She arrived late, wearing grief like a costume. Black silk. Glasses she didn't need. Her voice shook with theatrical rage. You ruined everything, she said. No, I said. I revealed everything. You think this makes you noble? You think Dad would be proud? I smiled. He left it to me, Harper. Not the money. The truth. She faltered. You don't know what it cost me. No. I know exactly what it cost you. Because you sold it piece by piece. Until there was nothing left to inherit but shame. She stepped forward. You think you've won? I know I haven't lost. Then she laughed, but it cracked, and from that crack came the confession I needed. He made me watch that video, Ava. The one he left you. I saw it before you did. He said you were the future. That I was obsolete. That I'd be remembered as the mistake. I couldn't let him be right. I didn't flinch. I just pressed the recorder in my pocket, and she didn't even notice. The recorder clicked softly in my pocket. Harper didn't even glance down. Her rage had made her blind to everything else. When she finally turned to leave, I didn't stop her. She was walking straight into her own collapse. And I no longer needed to lift a finger. That night, I sent the file to 3 inboxes, one anonymous drop to federal oversight, one to my contact at the Department of Economic Crimes, and one directly to VTKOVA.by morning. The press had it. The Delaney Foundation, once an icon of luxury, charity, and innovation, was on every front page. Its successor, Harper Delaney, was now publicly connected to accounts funneling laundered funds to blacklisted organizations. The real story wasn't in the money. It was in the betrayal. Of trust. Of image. Of family. Ava Delaney's name, by contrast, was conspicuously absent, because the firewall held, because my father planned for this, because I didn't flinch. I was standing in the same warehouse where he'd stored that first encrypted drive when the call came. You're clear, the voice said. No greeting. And you're protected. I knew who it was. Not Liam. Not the liaison, Vitkova. Harper? I asked. She's been contacted by the FEC. She'll be under investigation for a long time. The assets are frozen. But you already knew that. I needed to hear it out. Loud. There was a pause. Your father wasn't sentimental, Ava. But he was precise. And he was never wrong about potential. Click, that was the last I heard from her. I didn't need more. I stood alone in that warehouse, surrounded by remnants of a man who'd orchestrated his family like a chessboard. He hadn't chosen a favorite. He'd chosen an inheritor, and I had inherited everything that mattered, not just the funds. Not just the clean records, but the clarity. In the weeks that followed, I made moves Harper never would have understood. I converted the offshore firewall into a foundation, not one with my name, but one with my vision. I used the data we'd recovered to launch encrypted consulting for whistleblowers inside high-risk financial sectors. And quietly, without ceremony, I made my father's shell companies transparent, one by one. It wasn't redemption. It was justice. Real justice isn't about revenge. It's about precision. And timing. It's about understanding that silence isn't weakness, it's storage. Of rage. Of truth. Of power, and when it's released, it changes everything. Harper fled the state a month later, but not before leaving. One last note in my mailbox. Handwritten, you always were the better liar. But I was the better daughter. I smiled, because she was wrong on both counts. She lied for love. I told the truth for legacy, and daughters like me, we don't beg to belong. We build what they thought we couldn't. Looking back, I don't remember the exact moment I stopped being the family embarrassment, because it didn't happen all at once. It happened gradually. In the silence. In the study of every box they thought was useless. In the sleepless nights decoding symbols no one else bothered to question. In every moment I held back tears and replaced them with tactics. You see, power doesn't show up in fury or volume. It shows up in strategy, and when the people who doubted you the most are forced to watch what you built from what they discarded, that's real power. Harper may have inherited the house, the titles, the illusion, but I inherited the plans, the truth, and I built something permanent from their temporary victories. To everyone watching this, if you've ever been discarded, underestimated, or mocked for not playing the game the way they wanted, you are not weak. You're just building differently. They'll tell you silence is surrender. It isn't. It's loading. They'll say your pain is proof you're failing. It's not. It's pressure. Pressure that will forge you. You don't need to scream to be strong. You don't need to be seen to be smart. You don't need permission to rise. All you need is to keep every scar sharp, every lesson archived, every betrayal documented, because one day, like me, you'll realize, they didn't bury you, they stored you, and now it's time to open the door. If this story moved you, shook you, or reminded you of who you really are, subscribe to the channel. We've got more stories like this coming, and I promise, they won't just entertain you. They'll wake something up in you. Thank you for watching. Stay sharp.